Okay, there are many questions that the people of this world are asking. Since they see coronavirus in the news non-stop, 24/7, and all news media talk about it, discuss it, including false or fake news, it shows that people are very much concerned. So they ask the question, is coronavirus the final plague? When they look at the statistics and the clampdowns and the lockdowns that is happening in several places simultaneously in the world. And of course, we know those things. Italy is on lockdown, and many other cities. And as I mentioned earlier, Chicago, Illinois is going into lockdown. California is going into lockdown. And many other places are going to lockdown. Of course, Metro Manila and many people just simply want to disobey. And they don't care. It's to his own. So it's a critical situation. Many people don't want to obey. Or some will ask, are we now at the end of the world? Some people are contemplating that. Or, is Christ coming soon? And many fiery evangelists will say, you repent because Christ will come tonight. And you better be saved, or tomorrow, or next week, or next month. But he's now coming, or definitely next year. But are those pronouncements and claims true? Will this crisis lead to the Battle of Armageddon? Many are concerned about that question. Will it trigger World War III? So those are because of fear, because of anxiety. But as the sermon man tried to put it in a proper perspective, we need to answer these concerns and these questions. Okay. Now, I think one of the things that will help us be able to address this anxiety and concern of most people is to look at this problem in a bigger perspective. Okay? So that when we look at it from a bigger perspective, we'll be able to see how to position ourselves and how to understand it from a bigger world context, not just as of now, not just as of late December last year. That's what it's called COVID-19. That's when this coronavirus was first identified late last year. It first surfaced late last year. They were able to give it a name until the middle or early January, when they found out that it is a virus and saw its appearance in electron microscopes. Okay, so we need to address that question. So today I'd like us to understand more fully the context of where we are in Bible prophecy. Okay, taking in consideration this coronavirus. So if you'd like to have a title for the message, I would suggest Worldwide Pandemics, Past, Present, and Future. So for a perspective, we need to see the past, and we need to look at our present and what it portends in the future. So worldwide pandemics, past, present, and future. Now what is a pandemic? Pandemic is bigger than an epidemic. Okay? Outburst, that's local. Epidemic, kind of widespread over a certain territory. But when you say pandemic, that begins to have worldwide effect. Okay, it's a bigger scale. Now, I'd like to start with talking about the past. Past. Have there been, the question now about the past, have there been bigger pandemics than what we have now? That's a good question to begin with, so that we can put in proper perspective what we now have in the coronavirus. I researched a little, and there are many pandemics that swept through our world, I just want to hit on the 10 greatest worldwide plagues in history. 10 of the greatest worldwide plagues in history. Some of you might be familiar with this. Some have no idea about them. But the last one that I'm mentioning, or the first one that I'll be mentioning, most are familiar. Okay, what is the latest before this coronavirus? Before this, what was the latest worldwide pandemic that we have? I am going to, or my source material picks up only those that have casualty into the millions. Hindi lang thousands. SARS, just thousands. MERS, just thousands. Okay? Swine flu, that's just thousands. We are talking about into the millions. Okay? As a pandemic. Okay. The first that I'll be mentioning here is the HIV, thus AIDS. And many of us still know and have heard about this. Okay. It has killed, as of today, an estimated 36 million deaths. 36 million HIV AIDS. It was first identified in the Republic of Congo way back in 1976. Some of our listeners were not born yet at that time or were just babies. Okay, it started in the Republic of Congo in Africa, and it ravaged the Sub-Sahara area, and just recently, between 2005 and 2012, which is the latest compilation of the statistics I got, the deaths dropped from 2.2 million per year, or within this period, to 1.6 million. And it is not yet totally eradicated. People are still warned about the possibility of HIV AIDS to this day. I'm in communication with many pastors in Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and one thing that I noticed among them is that all of them, almost all of them, talk about taking care of orphans. I said, we're taking care of orphans. He said, these are children that have been left by their father and mother. I said, where are they? They said they died of AIDS. The father contracts it, passes it on the wife, both of them die. And so the children are orphaned, living in the streets, and some of these people take them under their wings and feed them and clothe them and educate them. And many capitalize on that as their ministry. And so they contact people around the world, religious organizations, asking for help and funding. And that is why many have approached me, thinking I could provide them funds to feed all these orphans. But it's one of the biggest thing that happened in Africa. And imagine 76, that's over 30 years or so. And it's one of the biggest worldwide pandemic, and still present to this day. Health departments warn people about AIDS and the fear of AIDS, and that it cannot be treated or very difficult to treat. Okay, that's the first that I'd like to mention. And many have heard, obviously, the word AIDS, HIV, human immune virus, and acquired deficiency syndrome. Okay, next to that, many might not know this, but we talk of the flu pandemic of 1968. Many might not have been born yet at that time, but the flu pandemic of 1968 killed about 1 million. And where did it start? It was identified that started in Hong Kong on July 13, 1968. And so many people call it the Hong Kong flu. Hong Kong flu killed 1 million in the flu epidemic of 1968. Okay, moving back a little bit more, we have as the third one here the Asian flu. The Asian flu, which raged over this world in 1956 to 1958. And the total death is 2 million. And the virus is identified to be H2N2 virus. And again, this Asian flu, that's why it's called Asian, because it started also in China. So many of these epidemics are starting in that area of the world, China. Not to belittle them, but they don't observe any food laws, and they eat practically any animal. And since they are mostly atheists, they are not familiar with God's commands concerning food, and that's why that usually is the source of these epidemics. So we've talked about the Asian flu. Next, in 1918, going back much earlier, we have again the flu pandemic. So flu, it's this third that is listed here, the flu pandemic. Actually, there are more. The flu pandemic, which started in 1918. 1918. That's when my father was born. And it killed about 50 million deaths. And something surprising about this flu pandemic compared to this coronavirus, where it tends to hit usually the elderly people. This flu pandemic in 1918 surprisingly killed younger and healthier people. Okay? And somehow spared the older people. So that's kind of strange for that flu pandemic in 1918. And sometimes we have to use the year when it came out to identify, because there are many flu pandemics. And then moving a few years earlier, we have the sixth cholera pandemic. Cholera. This occurred between 1910 and 1911. It killed 800,000, and it originated in India and then spread to many other places. But it started in India. And of course, this reflects on that nation who are not really high on sanitation and proper waste disposal. And so we have this problem of cholera. I remember when I was a child, many other of these new diseases were not known, but I heard my father talking about the deadly diseases at that time. It was either tuberculosis, cholera, or dysentery. Cholera and dysentery had to do with waste disposal problem and lack of sanitation, and tuberculosis, staying up late, over drinking, and many other things. But those were the popular cause of death at the time. And since that time, there have been many more that have come upon this world. So let's move further. Moving back about 10 years, we have another flu pandemic in 1889 to 1890. 1889 to 1890. So we have the Spanish rule at that time. Spanish rule, where 1 million deaths were recorded. And it was originally called, again, the Asiatic or Russian flu. So most of these pandemics have started in Asia. And this time, Russia has been involved. And it has been identified later on as the N3H8 virus, much later, when they began to study these things. Now, let's move about 30 years earlier of the third cholera pandemic. So choleras have been coming in waves in the same way that flu had been coming in waves upon this world. The third cholera pandemic happened in 1852 to 1860 for 8 years. 8 years. Third cholera pandemic. Again, an estimated 1 million deaths were casualty, and again it originated in India. Again, India, and followed the route of the Ganges River and infected many other places from there on. And eventually, it went to the UK, United Kingdom, and there had been 23,000 deaths in the UK as a result of this third cholera pandemic. Now, you would recall how come that there are so many cholera pandemics, because at the time, the water-sealed toilet has not yet been invented. So it was the open system. In the open system, flies go in and out, visit those places, and go over your food, and people eat the food and without minding, and so that is how it spread rapidly. Now, let's go back even further, about 200 years earlier. We come to the period of the Black Death. Black Death. The Black Death happened in 1346 to 1353, or 7 years. 7 years of this pandemic. It is also called the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague, which struck Europe and Asia and England, Italy, and many other places, where there are about 200 million deaths that was caused by the bubonic plague. And since the people at that time were not scientific, they don't know about microscope or hygiene rules or even quarantine. They didn't know that. So 200 million deaths in Europe, and people just keep dying all over. So 200 million deaths. And later on, they were able to trace the cause to rats and the fleas that infect the rats. Now, how did it spread from Europe, all over Europe, to crossing the Atlantic and going to other places, including England at the time? England was struck by this bubonic plagues. The rats were living in the sewers of London, in and out, and causing this infection. They did not know that the rats and the fleas in them were responsible. How did it go to England when Europe and England is separated by the Atlantic Sea? What they did not do before was that the merchant ships from Europe to England carried these rats. Did they check in as passengers? Did they have tickets? Of course not. So how did they ride? Well, I've seen this myself. From the pier, if you have been watching carefully, these rats travel to the ropes from the pier to the ship, and then stay in the ship and multiply in the ship and other things. And so while the ship is docked for days or weeks, these rats go there. And so when the ship travels, it goes to another place, and the rats go down to the same route, the ship. Okay, that's why many years ago, even my childhood, but this is very late already, I've seen that the ships have a metal ship over their ropes. Okay, I asked my father once, why do you have to put a flat metal ship about 12 inches diameter over the rope? He said that is to prevent rats from getting there. But some rats are clever because there is a gap, and the rats go under the gap and move on. So it's a little difficult or tricky to prevent them from spreading. So, in fact, that is the most feared death, and the biggest, the bubonic plague, or the Black Death. Why do they call it Black Death? The person who is infected turns dark. Okay, and they call it the Black Death. Now, we go back over about 100 years, 1,000 years. We're just identifying some of the big ones. We have the plague of Justinian. Okay, the plague of Justinian, or the Justinian plague, which is also similar to the bubonic plague. And it has caused 25 million deaths. It affected Europe and Eastern Mediterranean, and Constantinople, which formerly was named Byzantine Empire. Now, if you recall this year, 541, Napoleon, no, sorry, not Napoleon, but Constantine the Great was dead already 100 years. Justinian took over, and by this time, the Roman Empire has already been divided into two: the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. The Eastern Empire was headquartered in Constantinople. Constantine the Great gave his name there. And the Western Empire is headed by Rome, headquartered in Rome, Italy. Okay, these were the years, and they've been struck by the bubonic plague. And within the couple of millennium, we go back to Antonine plague. This Antonine plague happened in 165 AD. 165 AD. This is about 30 years after the Bar Kokhba revolt, and it produced 5 million deaths. Historians did not quite understand what was the cause, but it was spread by the Roman army. The Roman army at that time was the great power of this world, and wherever they went, they happened to spread this Antonine plague. So we have here the past greatest worldwide plagues in history. Let me review. The latest is the HIV/AIDS. Next to that was the flu pandemic of 1968. And then third from that is the Asian flu of 1956 to 1958, 2 years. And then the fourth from the latest is the flu pandemic of 1918. And then we have the sixth cholera pandemic of 1910 to 1911. And then the flu pandemic of 1889 to 1890. And then we have the third cholera pandemic of 1852 to 1860. And then we have the popular Black Death, bubonic plague of the 1300s, 1346 to 1353. Second to that, the plague of Justinian, 541 to 42, and Antonine plague of 165 AD. These are the 10 biggest plagues in history. Top notcher is, of course, the Black Death with 200 million deaths. Okay. The next top notcher here is the flu pandemic of 1918, where we have the 50 million deaths and many other things. So that is the past, pandemics of the past. Now, let's take about the pandemic of the present. The pandemic of the present is being, or the title for that is being taken by the COVID-19 epidemic. It started as the Wuhan coronavirus, and then the World Health Organization renamed it as COVID-19 because they don't want to associate it with any place para hindi naman mapahiya in China, and so they just call it COVID, coronavirus disease 19. That's the year when it was first identified. And let's look at the facts and figures for this. Well, presently in that, it was identified December, late December, January, February, March. We're in the third month, still on the third month. But of course now, we have better scientific knowledge, and so we are able to control it, unlike many decades or centuries ago. medical science had hardly any knowledge. They had no scientific knowledge at the time. It's mostly superstition. In fact, back to superstition, during the bubonic plague, people of England and Europe were blaming the Jews because they are not getting infected. Why? They did not know the connection between diet and sanitation and quarantine. And so, that's the Jewish practice. But actually, that's how they survived. But they were creating all these false rumors and theories that they have. Now we have scientific knowledge. That's why it's being controlled aggressively, even with lockdowns and confining people to their houses. So COVID-19, let's look at the statistics. In my article on the coronavirus, I put there, if you want to monitor the latest statistics on this, we have what we call the worldometers.info and then /coronavirus. World meaning dig worldometers.info /coronavirus. I checked this about 2 hours ago, and the latest statistic is that there are 276,462 cases. Okay? 276,462 cases. Although many scientists dispute this. They said much of this has not been reported, especially in China. They held the figures. They are not counting all the people that died in the hospitals and in the homes, and those that were cremated. They're not counting that. So they're trying to trim down the figure so that China will not be put to shame. And the deaths from coronavirus so far is 11,417. 11,417. But again, many authorities and scientists don't believe that. They said it could be 5 times that number, because many of the cases are not being reported. And of course, they claim to have 91,954 recoveries. Now, I tried to print out a detailed statistics on this coronavirus. Still, ranking number 1 is China. And of course, the sanitized statistics is 81,008 cases, but many people in China don't believe this, and they have a new case of 41. So the new cases are beginning to decline in China because they have done stringent measures of quarantine, starting with Wuhan, and then Hubei province where Wuhan is, and then most of China. Total deaths in China is 3,255. But again, this is disputed. They said it could be 50 times more. It's not being really reported. So the ratio, based on this submitted statistics by China, is that the total cases is 56 for every 1 million of the population. 56 only. But many people don't believe that. The next, that the statistics don't seem to be altered or hidden. Number 2 in this world today is Italy. Italy has 47,021 cases, and the deaths are already 4,032. 4,013 just started a few weeks ago. So 4,000. It has or surpassed China. Well, in figure, yes, because China didn't report all the deaths. Okay? And there are still 37,860 cases in Italy and 2,655 in serious or critical condition. And the ratio is they have 778 infections for every 1 million population. Yan, medyo that's credible. Third is Spain. So, still there in Europe, 21,571 cases. Out of that, they had already a death of over 1,093, and they have a ratio of infection of 461 people per 1 million population. Right now, there are 18,890 cases, active cases, right in Spain. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth is Germany. Germany has 19,848 cases. 68 have died. Okay, and compared to the population, they have a ratio of 237 cases per 1 million population. What's the fifth? The fifth nation is USA. You'll be surprised. Tinaman ng USA. With 19,773 cases and adding very fast. New cases, 390 in just one day. By the way, I'll move back to Italy. Yesterday, I read that they had, within 24 hours, they had 495 deaths in 24 hours in one day. Ang bilis. 490 deaths, almost 500,000. Almost 500, I should say. Almost 500 in one day. So, U.S., because of this big number, they are beginning to clamp down. Okay? Lockdown many cities and states, and this has a domino effect. Right now, there are 19,000 cases in the U.S., and the ratio per population is 60 cases per 1 million. They have at least low, and they're trying their best to cut that down. Following U.S. is Iran. We know that Iran has been infected with 19,644 cases, 19,644 cases, and they have already 1,433 deaths in Iran. 1,433 deaths in Iran. And the ratio to the population of infected, 234. And of course, you'll be bored with figures. My statistics cover practically all the countries of the world. After Iran, we have France, South Korea, Switzerland, UK, Netherlands, Austria, Belgium, Norway, Sweden. So most of these are in Europe. And then we have Denmark, Canada, Australia, Malaysia, Portugal, and then Japan with over 1,000 cases, 35 deaths, and then Brazil, and then Diamond Princess cruise ship was included here. It has 712 cases with 8 deaths. And then Israel, 705 infections, 1 death. And then Ireland, Turkey, Pakistan, Greece, Luxembourg, Qatar, Finland, Chile, Ecuador, Poland, Thailand is ahead of us. Iceland, Singapore, Indonesia still ahead of us. Saudi Arabia, the Middle East still there. Slovenia, Romania, Bahrain, Egypt, and Estonia, India has higher than us. And then Peru, and then we have Philippines. Philippines has 262 cases, and new cases added within the 24-hour period, 32. So this will bring to 294 cases, almost 300, and the deaths are already 18 in the Philippines. Close to, I know there is a case in Tagum, there's a case in Santo Tomas. These are from OFWs who have come back from the Middle East and Hong Kong and other places. And our ratio to population infection is 34 infections per 1 million population. Then following us is Hong Kong and Russia and Iraq, Mexico, South Africa, Panama, Lebanon, Kuwait, Argentina, Colombia, San Marino, UAE, United Arab Emirates, Slovakia, Armenia, Taiwan, Serbia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Costa Rica, Latvia, Uruguay, Alegria, Vietnam, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Morocco, Hungary, Jordan, Faroe Islands, Brunei, North Macedonia, Andorra, Cyprus, Sri Lanka, Dominican Republic, Albania, Lithuania, Belarus, Moldova, and Venezuela, Malta, Tunisia, Kazakhstan, New Zealand had 42 cases, no deaths. Wow. And 11 per million population. Guadeloupe, 51, Cambodia, Oman, Palestine, Senegal, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Ukraine, Burkina Faso, Reunion, Uzbekistan, Martinique, Liechtenstein, Cameroon, Afghanistan, Honduras, Cuba, Bangladesh, Jamaica, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, Paraguay, Macau, Rwanda, Bolivia, Ghana, Guyana, France, Guyana, Guam, Montenegro, Puerto Rico, Maldives, Guatemala, Nigeria, Channel Islands, Mauritius, Monaco, France, Polynesia, that's in the Pacific, no deaths, Gibraltar, Mongolia, Ivory Coast, Ethiopia, Togo, Trinidad, Tobago, Kenya, Mayotte, Seychelles, Barbados, Equatorial Guinea, Kyrgyzstan, Tanzania, and Sanato. I got lost here in my papers. Lots of them. So several pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages back-to-back printing. So lots of this the last. Sorry. Zambia, Nepal, Angola, Antigua, and Barbados, Barbuda, Cabo Verde, Chad, Djibouti, Gambia, Vatican City, Montserrat, Niger, Papua New Guinea, Saint Vincent, Grenadines, Saint Martin, Somalia, Eswatini, I don't know this, Zambia, letter Z. Zambia has 1 case, not Zambia, Zimbabwe, I should say. Zimbabwe, this Zimbabwe was formerly Rhodesia, and no death, and cases per population 0.07. The least infection, very far away, that's in South Africa, Rhodesia. So you want to see, of course, I don't know how you can see, but you can check in your computer about these statistics. So that's the present plague that we have. I would say that if it were not for our scientists and biologists and microbiologists and all the experts, if we did not exercise quarantine, we could have been into the millions already. Okay, but because of the aggressive defense systems that our health authorities have instituted, learning from lessons in history, and this time following a biblical solution. You know where quarantine came from? That's from the Bible. The book of Leviticus, it keeps talking about quarantine. And so it's good that they're adopting biblical principles, because unless you adopt the biblical principle, the disease will just simply spread. And so we are respecting the moves of our government to be able to stop the transmission of this virus. It is hope that it was illustrated. There was an illustration, I think, shared by VL in our COG member Facebook. Matchsticks, and then there is one that is isolated, and then live matchsticks. All this like dikit-dikit. You light one, it will light all the others. But because one quarantined itself, the next set was not affected. Okay, that makes sense. And that is the principle of quarantine. If you don't keep social distance of suggested 6 meters between each other, you will likely transmit the disease. And normally, you don't know whether a person is a carrier or not, because the symptoms do not appear until about 2 to 3 weeks later. So some noted personalities in our country that are affected already. I know Senator Subiri of Bukidnon. He has quarantined himself because he got infected. And this morning I learned that even Health Secretary Francisco Duque III has also been infected, and there are many other doctors and nurses attending to cases which have already been infected. And so it's a very vicious and very dangerous. And those are some. So we could see that money and position cannot save a person. If one person is exposed, he will most likely be infected. So it's a very dangerous thing, and we just have to be glad and thankful that our authorities are following biblical principles to be able to contain this disease. And we are advised not to go to crowded areas, avoid any activity that is not essential to survival at this time. So no outing, no parties, no restaurants. And we go to what is good about this. We have some good things out of this coronavirus epidemic. They are actually, in a way, a blessing in disguise. Okay, blessing in disguise. And as was mentioned, it gives us time to reflect on the most important values in life. What's the most important? Because many people earn money, save money, build things, build hotels. Now, who is occupying hotels now? Zero. So invest in airplanes, industry, tourism. Who are riding airplanes now? Almost zero. And about tourism, Mingaw, Ginalanaw, ang mga tourist spots. So you invest on those things. So it's time to really reflect what are the most important things in life that really counts in the long run. When we are affected by diseases and epidemic, and it gives people to have time with the family. Those are benefits there. Otherwise, everyone's on the rush, go everywhere. They seldom talk to each other, or even seldom see each other. Now they're forced to sit down and talk and fellowship with family. It also simplifies life. Okay, so many elaborate things you go without, and you have to conserve what money you have to buy the most essential. No luxury items, because we don't know how long this will be, and without good, adequate income, it will be a big problem. And it helps people trim their budgets to the basic necessities. And companies, many companies have to rethink how they operate. And now, several companies were forced to resort to online job. Employees don't have to report. They just do their work online. They're given assignments for that day. You report back what you've done for that day. And management is happy. At least something is happening, even if they aren't reporting on the desk. Okay? So it's good. And another big blessing, especially to our family, is the reduced flight costs. It has gone down more than about 50%. And we're happy about that. Because otherwise, especially approaching the feast, I would advise people, buy your tickets now. Okay, while the prices are very low, and those who would have to fly for the feast, buy your tickets now. Kasi when the crisis is solved, tataas na naman yan. So now is the time. And for those who are wise in investment, these are the times to buy stock market. If you want to have your money there. So, because after this crisis is over, and some estimate it to be about summer months in the U.S., hopefully, if people cooperate, it will be solved. So things will go back to normal, prices will go back to normal, people will go to their old lifestyles, to their usual lifestyles, and that will create a different scenario. But now, while the people of the world look bleakly on this coronavirus, there are hidden advantages there. Okay, and it helps us to refocus, reorganize, rethink many things. Now, of course, obviously, this coronavirus has caused a big downturn in the world's economy. Downturn. Many activities have stopped. Okay, except groceries and pharmacies, and of course banks have reduced their banking hours, money transmittals, but all non-essentials have closed down, and there are many people that are losing their job. In the United States, the giant auto manufacturers, Ford, Chrysler, have laid out thousands of employees because of these things. So it produced a downturn in the world economy, and as I read earlier, many economists fear that it will go, the U.S. and other nations will go into recession, and even worse, they fear depression. Some might still be able to recover, but many might not be able to recover. It also, another thing is, it identifies companies that are good, humanitarian companies that think of their employers, and so give their bonuses early, give certain allowances to their employees. Yung iba, walang pakialam. So they don't care. And so it identifies the attitude of employers and companies. Okay, now, so we have talked about the past, the present, and the future. We come now to the future. What lessons can we learn about this? Okay. One is that it somehow fulfills prophecy. Okay, there are many prophetic books that talks about this, but one that seems to directly address this issue is found in Isaiah. Let's open there. I'll be brief. Many of the scriptures have been brought out, or you've read that in many of the postings. One of them is found in Isaiah 26:20. Isaiah 26:20, describing what is happening now in our quarantine, expanded community quarantine, and in lockdowns. In Isaiah 26:20, it said, "Come, my people, enter your chambers, enter your houses, stay in your rooms, and shut your doors behind you. As much as possible, minimize going out. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little moment." So quarantine is a temporary situation. I hope you are following Isaiah 26:20. Until the indignation is past. Okay. The indignation because of man's disobedience to God's laws. He said, "For behold, the Eternal comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth will also disclose her blood and will no more cover her slain." So the dead are many. And as was mentioned, you cannot break God's law and get away with it. You will break yourself against God's laws. So I hope that as a result of this present problem, people are now beginning to look into the Bible and look into food laws. You cannot ignore the direct correspondence between the virus and the food laws and what people did in Wuhan, China. You cannot. While many news media reports did not mention that, I put aside other articles and considered the coronavirus to show the relationship between what people eat, eating the unclean, and what happens to their diet and the virus and the calamity it has created. And I hope more people will take stock, will listen, and now I don't know to what percent people now try to obey God's law more seriously. You cannot run away from disobeying God's law. So that's one that we can take up. And of course, 2 Corinthians 7 was read earlier in the sermonette, 2 Corinthians 7, 13 to 14. And of course, the lessons that we can learn, he said it's a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call. And hopefully, people will really wake up. And for those who will wake up, it's good for them. For those who still will not wake up, I would say it will be bad for them. Yeah, saka na yan. Wala na. Okay lang yan. Which reminds me of an illustration. Among creatures, amphibians tend to adapt to their surrounding environment, especially temperature. Now, a common amphibian is a frog. It has been demonstrated or illustrated that you put a frog in a glass bowl. Okay, cold water. So the frog is there, comfortable, cold water. Put a little heat. The frog will adjust. Okay, I can tolerate a little heat. Increase it some more. The frog will still adjust and say, okay, I can take care. Add more heat until finally it's almost boiling. And the frog will still let go out. Why? It has adjusted itself to the temperature. And so eventually what you will be able to find out is a soft boiled frog. But it did not go out. And so I hope it does not happen to us, brethren. These times are, shall we say, warning, okay? Warning shots, warning calls, and we have to take note about these things. Now, beyond this, we are all familiar with the Olivet prophecy. If you'll open with me to Matthew 24, let's just review a few items here. And just to remind ourselves where we are. Matthew 24, Olivet prophecy, when Christ was talking to his disciples privately, telling them, briefing them about things to come. The background is Mount of Olives in verse 3 of Matthew 24. And the disciple asked, what are the signs of your coming and of the end of this age? Verse 4, Yeshua answered, said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. So religious deception has been on this earth for a long, long time. And still is. Okay, it's still there. And many will shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ. And will deceive many, claiming they are the Son of God, claiming they are the prophet. They are claiming they are the first century apostle. So it will be there. So that's realistic, and Christ predicted that. And of course, deceive many. And of course, in verse 6, we'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. We have had a feel of that. But Don't be troubled, he said, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So New York world and troubles and saber rattling of nations, North Korea firing missiles, that's not yet the end. Okay. Verse 7, nation will rise against nation. The word nation here is actually ethnos. Okay. Will rise against ethnos. Ethnic tribe or tribes. And kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines. Now, famines, the onslaught of locusts in Africa and later in the Middle East will produce definitely famine. And pestilences. Now, plagues are pestilences. Coronavirus is a pestilence. And earthquakes in various places, we know that. Since the feast, we have had that in Mindanao and other places until November. So earthquakes were familiar in various places. And when all these things happen, these are just the beginning of sorrows, difficulties. Just the coronavirus gives us difficulties. There is panic buying in the U.S. especially. They just put their credit card, swipe it. It's good that in the Philippines we have a control, okay? We are limited to buying only a few items, number of pieces of items categorized. Otherwise, the person violating it could be charged for economic sabotage and many other things. So, but I am sure that many other states will be able to implement that when they see the lawlessness happening. But my children in the U.S. are telling me of the long lines of shoppers down to the parking area and hard to get a parking space. So even here I heard that because of the social distancing, people line up even outside the shopping malls. So these are troubling times, beginning of sorrows. But what will follow is even more dangerous. More dangerous. Why? Verse 9. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. That is kind of dangerous. And so we need to be warned about this. And many will be offended and will betray one another and hate one another. And of course, the false prophet will arise. And this is many, it's talking more of the false prophet that has been prophesied to rise up at the end time. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Don't care. I will consume all of these goods in the grocery. I don't care about you. And I even heard that in California, some people are beginning to buy more guns. Why? Because they know at a future thing, they're thinking about it. They will assault and try to grab what you have stored in terms of food stocks. But before that happens, they'll try to defend it with their gun. So it will result to lawlessness. And it says, he that endures to the end shall be saved. And of course, this gospel of the kingdom will preach in all the world. Don't wait for us to be able to preach the gospel into all the world. This is, or any of the churches, corporate Church of God, no. This will be completed by the two witnesses. So don't wait that, the preaching of the gospel has not yet been finished. And then after that, we have the great tribulation. Now I'd like you to compare this. Let's compare this with Revelation chapter 6, the seals of Revelation, because we are now into prophecy. What will be next things? So the first four things are happening and have happened and will continue to happen. But after these four things, what's the next? Let's open to Revelation chapter 6. Starting verse 1, John saw in a vision. He said, "Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, and said, 'Come and see.' So John went to see." Verse 2, "And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out, conquering and to conquer." This is not the Christ. This is the false Christ. This is the false religious leader trying to convert the world in its counterfeit Christianity. Okay? We know that. It has gone riding for centuries. Next, the second, verse 3. "When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, 'Come and see.' And another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword." Now, sword here is metaphorical, meaning means to destroy, to cause death. Okay, this world has gone through the earlier wars, Napoleonic wars, 70-year war, and many other things. But most significant in our time was World War I, started in 1917, and then World War II, okay, started in Europe, and then it went through about 7 years. 1938 in Europe, and then ended only in about 1944 to 45. That's World War II. And now we are waiting for World War III, which can be triggered by many factors. So it's not too far-fetched. So that war represents the red horse. And go to verse 5. "When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. And do not harm the oil and the wine.'" What is a denarius? Denarius is 1 day's wage. So a quart of wheat, yung quart, pint, I don't know how they term this in Cebuano. Quart. Yung lata ng paint or oil, malit lang, that's a quart. And how much does it cost? Because of scarcity, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley. Barley is the cheapest among cereals, for a denarius. 1 day's wage, and you just get this amount of food. Another 1 day's wage, and you just get 3 of the cheapest oats. Because how do you know that's cheap? Barley, I should say, barley. That's fed to the horses in the U.S. The cheapest that they can give, barley, and of course sometimes oats. "And do not harm the oil and the wine." Oil could be referred to fuel. Okay, fuel supplies, and the wine, still alcohol, ethanol, fuel supplies. It is at risk. Now it has dropped to a low price, but things can change. Things can change that. And the fourth seal, verse 7. "When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature." So among the fourth, first, second, now the fourth living creature was called. And he said, "Come and see." And John looked, and behold, a pale horse and thin horse, I would say, and the name of him who sat on it was Death. Why? Because of scarcity of food. 1 day's wage, and you just get a quart of an item of food. Naturally, it will result to starvation. And so people will be sickly. Their immune system will be very low. And because of semi-starvation, they'll easily get sick. And then they can easily get infected. And this is going to happen. And the name of him who sat on it was death. And Hades, meaning the grave, followed with him. So malnutrition, hunger will result to death. So death or the grave is just behind this calamity. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, 1/4 of this earth's population. So if now we have 7.5 billion or 7.6 billion, 1/4 will be severely affected, to kill with the sword and with hunger and death and the beasts of the earth. Now, it will result to unrest, and this unrest will result to wars and killings. And so we are beginning to see the triggering mechanism for these things. So, but after this four, which we are now seeing in this world, comes the fifth. Verse 9, and we opened the fifth seal. I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with loud voice, this is metaphorical, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And they were given white robes, etc. Now, this talks about martyrdom. And that is what I said, we are facing a very dangerous next step. After these four horsemen, and we've seen them happening now, although they will gallop even stronger and faster and a greater intensity, the next is martyrdom. And there are powers now, there is a big religion in this earth that has no second thoughts about killing. They have no thoughts about killing. They have done that in the past, and they will continue to do it in the future. And there will be war between the beast powers. So we have at least already passed out of the 7 seals. We finished already the 4 ones, or we've already stepped into the 4 ones. And so we are waiting for the next one, which will be martyrdom. And when this happens, when another calamity will hit this earth, people will then be docile. Yeah, we don't want more calamities, so let us just simply follow. What? And they will be looking for a world ruler. And that becomes dangerous. Because somebody from Europe is going to offer and said, okay, I'm the solution to the problem. You have to obey us. These are the protocols. This is what we will do. And it will fulfill the mark of the beast. Unless you have the mark, you cannot buy or sell at that time. So it will be economic suicide for those who will not follow the dictates of the beast power. But most people will be welcoming him. Okay, you are the solution to our problem. By that time, strong leaders like Trump will be gone. So we have to be ready for those things. Strong leaders like Duterte will be gone. And it's very fearsome to look into the future. But right now, the stage is being set for the people that will rule in a few more years, who will bear the mark of the beast and will begin the persecution. And our only hope is not in ourselves. Our only hope is not in our strong houses. There is only one hope: the deliverance that will be offered to us by the Almighty. Which means the only true preparation is not hoarding and buying food. No. It's not building strong buildings with double locks in the doors. No. The solution now is not in man's hands, but rather in building a relationship with God. That's the only solution. So that when the time comes, we have the assurance that He will save us. So, I just want to show you the proper perspective that it is not in the hands of man. It is not within our power. And let us trust in the promises here in Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3, in verse 10. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial or tribulation, which shall come upon the whole world. Now we see the virus coming upon the whole world, but there is something bigger than that, to test those who dwell on the earth. And said, behold, I come quickly, hold fast that which you have, that no man take your crown. And in verse 12 he said, he overcomes, I'll make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, and I will write on him the name of my God, or Yah, and the name of the city of my God, and the new Jerusalem which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I'll write upon him my new name. Why new name? I have mentioned this before, because his name is Yeshua, God saves. At this time, the salvation process is finished. It's now the process of rulership in the kingdom. So he will have a new name which will correspond to that. And so it's important for us to understand that our preparation is not on physical, but our preparation is based on the spiritual. That it will be God who will save us from the great tribulation. No one can save us, but God is the only one can save us. And of course, we see other prophecies here in Revelation 12 just to remind us about these things, those that will be saved. In verse chapter 12 of Revelation, verse 17, it says here, okay, or maybe to get a bigger context, in verse 14 of Revelation 12. But the woman, which is symbolic of the church, was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, her place, where is nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent, which equivalent to 3.5 years. So our safety is not here. We have to be taken out from here. The serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, meaning after the church, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood, causing the church to follow the ways of the world. Whether it is hairstyle, hair color, dress style, plunging necklines, miniskirts, will cause the church to follow the world. Okay? To be swallowed, to follow the world with these hairs, with these styles of living. Okay? But here in verse 16, the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. A flood here refers to people. And 17, and the dragon was enraged, angry with the church, the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offsprings. Offsprings? Children! Okay? And still talking of the woman who kept the commandments of God and had the testimony of Yeshua the Messiah. What we need to be aware here is to what extent our children will be carried by the world. How much they'll be influenced by the world. And it's our responsibility. Okay? Because that is the goal of Satan. And we are beginning to see children being carried out. And these are warning signs, warning calls. And we better wake up. And even as we are approaching the days of unleavened bread, the Passover and days of unleavened bread, it's time to wake up. This coronavirus epidemic or pandemic is teaching us to wake up. And we better do. And examine ourselves. And look at our families. Look at our children, lest they be carried out. and lose out on the promise of salvation. So it's very important now to consider these things very carefully. There are more things that can be said, but we'll be taking that up in other messages. So, in summary, this epidemic now has to be viewed in three levels or tenses. The past, okay, because of technology and science, we have not exceeded the mortality rates of the past, but if it were not for that, we would have followed. So let us not say, kaunti lang yan. No. Don't belittle it. Of course, we know that more things are coming up. And the present, let us consider the effect on this world and try to project where it will go. Let's look at the worldometer, and the graph is pointing up. It's not leveling yet. It's not leveling yet. As of yesterday, it's not level. The goal of governments is that the graph to level up. No, it's still pointing up, going up sharply. And so it is for us, the people, everyone to cooperate. I said, quarantine is only effective if it is leak-proof. Walang nakakalusot. Because if one or two or more is able to escape through the dragnet, they will multiply the calamity. So we need to do our part and pray and prepare. Pray and prepare for the future, because the future will be even more challenging. And the question now to each of us is, how prepared are we to face the future? How much foundation do we have to be strong enough to prepare and challenge the challenges of the future? That, brethren, each of us will have to answer the question. I cannot answer for you. Each one of us will have to answer. How prepared are we to face the future that will come, surely come upon this world? I hope that your preparation, our preparation, will be adequate to face the great challenge.